The history of the confrontation between the Indian tribes of the American continent and the colonists who arrived there and created their own state there included many wars, battles, skirmishes of various scales. Conflicts began almost from the very first arrival of a white man in the New World and lasted with varying success. However, with the passage of time and the development of the United States, the Indian population was increasingly lagging behind in technology, numbers, and organization, which entailed defeats, assimilation, displacement to the western territory of the continent. But the natives of America did not want to give up without a fight, and Indian wars broke out regularly. The last major war between the two peoples and cultures is also remembered for the last major military victory of the Indians over the Army of the United States, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The war began as always because of the land. After the Civil War, many Americans rushed to the west of the continent, where they met resistance from local tribes from the Sioux people. At first, the Indians managed to stop the colonization. The U.S. Army was bled dry by the recent war and went to a truce with the Indians in 1868. However, having accumulated strength, the army and the settlers again moved to the Indian lands in 1876. The Indians began to massively withdraw from their camps and retreat. They were followed by U.S. Army forces led by Generals Terry and Crook. Having stumbled upon traces of tribal camps, the command decided to send the main forces directly behind the Indians, and send their cavalry units across the river, to the upper reaches of the Little Bighorn River. The Cavalry Corps was commanded by George Custer, who was famous at that time. The detachment set out on June 22. We find a large camp of Indians. Custer decided to attack. Dividing his forces into several mobile groups, he launched an attack on the camp on June 25 at 1500 hours. However, starting the battle, the soldiers realized how big the camp of the Indians really was. The first group of U.S. troops retreated to the hill, while Custer himself continued to advance on the other flank, where he was soon surrounded and destroyed by superior Indian forces. The remaining units gathered on a hill, where they held the defense until the main forces of the U.S. Army approached, after which the Indians retreated. The U.S. Army lost 266 killed and 55 wounded. The Indians lost only about 50 men killed and about 25 wounded. Today this seems to be a very small loss, but at that time it was noticeable for the American continent, plus the very fact of the defeat of the regular, professional army and modern weapons from the unorganized, backward savages, which the Indians were then considered, caused a shock. The resonance in American society was enormous. Despite the victory at the Little Bighorn, the Indian tribes had no chance of winning against a large, organized European-style army. As early as 1877, most of the Indian forces were captured and placed on reservations. The United States continued its expansion to the west, without encountering large-scale and organized resistance from the Indians as a single, mass force. The Battle of the Little Bighorn remains a memorable event in the history of both sides. There are several memorials of this event. Several books have been written and several films have been made. Thank you for your attention. Stay tuned for more interesting stuff.